Look at you, all dressed up. Must have got off work.
Rudy, should we wait a couple minutes to start, or go ahead?
Yeah, we can go ahead and start, Mr. Chairman, if you want.
Okay. Well, let's go ahead and call this meeting to order for November 7th, 2012, Planning and Zoning Commission regularly scheduled meeting. Rudy, can we go ahead and have roll call?
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Chairman Patterson?
Here.
Vice Chairman Lukes?
Here.
Commissioner Garcia?
Here.
Commissioner Lee?
Here.
Commissioner Perez?
Here.
Commissioner Suazo?
Here.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, can we stand for the Pledge of Allegiance?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Oh, do we have any changes to the agenda from staff?
Mr. Chairman, at this time, staff has no proposed changes to the agenda.
Okay. Any changes from commission? None? With that, I would entertain a motion for approval of the agenda.
So moved.
Second.
Roll call vote?
Okay. Chairman Patterson?
Yes.
Vice Chairman Lukes?
Yes.
Commissioner Garcia?
Yes.
Commissioner Lee?
Yes.
Commissioner Perez?
Yes.
Commissioner Suazo?
Yes.
On to number 4, approval of meeting minutes. Looks like we're going to wait until the next meeting for our meeting from October 3rd. Is that right?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, there was no meeting for October 3rd. If you recall, we didn't have a quorum, so no minutes were available because there was no meeting, basically. So,
Yeah. And then
yeah.
September was the one before that.
That's correct, yes.
Okay. Okay. And with that, I think we can move on to preliminary public hearings. Rudy, can we have the rules for public hearings?
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman. In order to conduct an orderly and impartial public hearing, the chairman will preside and make all rulings for testimony given at tonight's meeting. The Planning Commission members have received and reviewed extensive materials regarding each application before the Commission tonight, including the application and all related documentation, staff reports, and any letters in the file either supporting or opposing the application. The following rules will apply. Number 1, all persons wishing to speak must first sign the speaker list and will be called in this order. Number 2, speakers will be allowed 3 minutes to address the Commission. Number 3, speakers representing other persons will be allowed 5 minutes. The speakers must show written documentation that they represent someone else. Number 4, the chairman will allow cross-examination or rebuttal if the chairman feels this is pertinent to the findings presented. Number 5, the chairman will not tolerate shouting or unruly conduct and may direct the sergeant-at-arms to have any person removed from the meeting for cause. Number 6, the chairman will then close the public hearing and allow the commission to deliberate the pending action to be taken based on findings presented by staff and by the public. The commission may approve, deny, approve with conditions, or postpone the decision to a subsequent meeting announced by the commission. Number 7, the chairman will then call for the question and voting will take place as to how to proceed on the application. Number 8, anyone aggrieved by the action of the Zoning Commission may file an appeal pursuant to the appeals procedure set forth in the Town of Taos Land Use Development Code. The appeal must be filed within 10 working days of the decision. Number 9, all cases will be heard on their own merits and do not create a precedent for other applicants.
Okay. With that, I think we can move on to case number SUB 2012-1. Do we have any updates to the staff report from our last meeting?
No, Mr. Chairman, no updates at this time.
Okay.
And so I don't know if the chairman would like me just to read a brief description of this case for
Yeah, why don't you
information of the
remind
public?
us, since it's been a month since we've looked at it.
Okay, Mr. Chairman, Commissioners, this is case number SUB 2012-1. Isaac Red Deer Creek Ranch LLC property owner, Alex Abeta agent, are requesting a preliminary plat approval on a proposed 3-lot Class B subdivision The 4-acre subject property is located at the southwest corner of the intersection of Bertha Road and Dia Lane and is zoned M1 light manufacturing within the town limits of the town of Taos. And Mr. Chairman, I stand for any questions at this time on this application.
Any questions for staff on this application? If not, would the applicant like to add anything to the presentation, Mr. Abeda?
Okay, do you swear to tell the truth?
I do.
Okay, and please mention your name for the record.
Alex Abeta.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, Commission members, this is a very straightforward application, probably as straightforward and simple as they get. The 4 acres is currently zoned M1, the corner of Bertha and Dia Lane. We're proposing 3 lots, one of 2 acres and a couple of them at 1 acre each. There's a private driveway that'll connect from Bertha to Dia that'll meet the town requirements. The roadway will be a gravel base course roadway. There will be no open space provided. The developer will pay the fee in lieu of the open space. Setbacks are all met. Overall, the entire application does not request any variances. It meets all the requirements of the land use subdivision regulations. In your packets, we had combined the preliminary sketch plan and the preliminary public hearing into one with approval from the planning department. And so it's before you. I've also reviewed the staff report by Mr. Rudy Perea, and he is recommending approval with some conditions. We've reviewed the conditions, and we just have one comment on one of the conditions. On page page 8 of 11 of the staff report, item A, traffic, based on the criteria of the Town of Taos Access Management Manual, the applicant will provide a TIA level traffic study. We currently don't know who the buyers and developers of 3 individual lots will be. So we're asking that as part of preliminary plat approval and a future final plat approval, that the TIA would be done by whoever buys the lot based on the actual project that they are going to build there. And based on building size and M1 use, it's more appropriate for the builder of the project. Because today, if we provide a traffic study, all we can do is guesstimate. Here's the square footage for each lot, here's the type of use, here's the traffic to be generated. So it's more appropriate for the traffic study to come from each of the 3 lots as they do their developments. Other than that, we're comfortable with the staff report, and we request your approval. Do you have any questions?
Mr. Chairman, if I may, if you look at page 7 on my staff report at the very bottom there, what I did mention in reference to the traffic study, it says as a condition of final plat approval on this subdivision, staff will recommend that this study be done at the time any of the lots within the proposed subdivision are developed. So if you look at that reference on page 7, I'm not requiring them to do a traffic study until the lots are actually developed. It's just that as part of the final plat approval, I just want that noted for the record that they will have to do that once they develop the lots, start to develop any of the lots. So just for the record, that's a clarification.
And we're fine with that. I only looked at what was on page 8, Rudy. So
oh, okay. No, that's fine now.
Page 7 definitely makes it clear, and we're fine with that.
Okay. All right. Sounds good.
And just for the record, this is a preliminary plat approval. This would move on to a final public hearing for a final plat approval. And then, Rudy, remind us, does it have one step after that to town council as a subdivision?
No.
No?
Just
Okay.
one more hearing before you guys, and then that's when they have to submit all the final drafts of the requirements, for final plat approval. Yeah.
Any questions from the commission? For Mr. Abeda? None? With that, I think we can close the public hearing, or before we close it, we should see if anybody
Yeah,
signed up to
let me
speak on
check
this
the
matter.
speakers list, Mr. Chair.
Okay.
No, Mr. Chairman, there has, nobody signed up to speak on this particular case.
Okay. So with that, I think we can close the public hearing. Oh,
I just have a question.
Ma'am.
The next person on the itinerary,
yep.
and I don't know if I need to speak or not.
Let us-
Requesting rezoning and re-annex.
Okay. Why don't you let us go ahead and finish this case?
Okay,
And I think we'll be finished with it pretty soon.
all right.
And then we'll move right on to yours.
Sorry.
Okay. So with that, I think we'll close the public hearing. If we don't have any discussions or questions from the commission, I would entertain a motion.
I'll make a motion. Motion to approve preliminary hearings, application SUB 2012-1, with conditions of approval and based on findings of facts, including the language regarding the traffic study, and move it to the final hearing on December.
December 5th, Commissioner
5th.
Lewis. Yes.
Second the motion.
Roll call vote, please.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Chairman Patterson,
Yes.
Vice Chairman Lukes,
Yes.
Commissioner Garcia,
Yes.
Commissioner Lee,
Yes.
Commissioner Perez,
Yes.
Commissioner Suazo.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. And with that, we can move on to our next case.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is case number ANX/ZC 2012-1. Francis C. Montoya, Loretta Robledo. Property owners are requesting an annexation and zone change for a .730 acre and .735 acre parcel of property located on Gustorf Road, which is immediately adjacent to the town limits of the town of Taos. The applicants are requesting a zone change on the subject parcels to R14 multifamily residential. And Mr. Chairman, at this point for the preliminary public hearing, I have no preliminary conditions placed on the applicants in order for this to move to a final public hearing, unless the commission has any once they hear this case. So I stand for any questions.
Okay. So, ma'am, if you have anything to add on top of what the staff report is, you're welcome to stand up and present any additional information to the council.
I don't have.
Okay. And then, as we review it, if we have any questions for you, we may ask you to step up and respond to any questions. So,
I have a question for the applicant.
Commissioner Lukes?
Why are you asking for R14 zoning?
And ma'am, if you can go ahead and step up to the microphone, and then we'll ask you to state your name and swear to tell the truth. Rudy, would you like?
Okay, please state your name for the record.
Loretta Robledo.
Do you swear to tell the truth?
I do.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, and the question again?
Why are you asking for R14 zoning?
Because I think right now it's rural and agricultural, and we just acquired the land through, my parents both passed away, and we just want to be able to patronize and utilize the town services, which are the city police, water, sewer facilities that are available to those particular plots of land and to the surrounding areas. So we just want access to water, gas, sewage, and which allows, so that we don't have to use septic tanks should we decide to build on the property.
Okay. The reason why I'm asking is because R14, that's really high density, and it's pretty good jump from county rural zoning. And I assume there are this property can be served by town utilities, water and sewer?
Mr. Chairman, Commissioner Lukes, yes, there are utilities available, and I did work with the applicant on this zoning designation because, as you can see from the map,
There's one side that's R14.
yeah, there's one side that's R14, and just within 300 feet, you have that apartment complex development that's zoned R14 as well.
Right.
So there's high-density development already in the area, and so the infrastructure is in place to support that that type of zoning.
Yeah, I don't have a problem with it, although R14 is really hard to build out to that density and do it well. So that's the only reason why I'm asking. And
No.
when you're transitioning from a rural county into a high density, it's a big leap. But as Mr. Perea said, you already have R14 next door to you, so
Surrounding, correct.
it does make sense. It can be justified. Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Chairman, I have just an academic question, I suppose. If you were just to annex this thing, period, what would be the zone that it would be designated?
You mean if the town, Commissioner Lee, was just annexing it?
Yes.
Well, at this point, we do have annexation hearing coming up on November 29th, but at that point, all the town would be doing was just be annexing in the property. And my boss can correct me if I'm wrong, but at that point, all the town's going to do is annex in property and not designate a zone as of yet for the property. So that's the difference here is that, if she does it on her own, she can get her own zoning designation versus the town trying to designate it as a zone. And, because right now all the town is looking at as part of its annexation plan is just to annex in property. And then later on, we were going to be looking at what zoning designations we were going to place on those properties once we annex them in. So they both weren't going to happen at the same time if the town does it, basically is what's going on.
But it's not actually a zone change, though, technically, either.
If the town does it?
No,
You mean
right-
like if the town
Right
annexes-
now, it's not a zone change. They're
Yes,
not changing
it
from
is.
one thing to another.
Yes, it's a zone change because right now their property is technically designated as county rural agricultural.
But now they're asking for annexation.
Yeah, they're asking for both, for
When it
annexation.
becomes annexed,
Then, yeah,
it's not changing from the zone of the county. It's then
That's-
starts from a blank slate because it's not designated at all in any zone.
well, it's designated, by the county as county rural agricultural. Yeah.
It's just an academic question.
Yeah, so, okay.
That's it?
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, any
Rudy,
other-
correct me if I'm wrong, when we've seen major zone changes in the past, they're usually accompanied by a pretty thorough development plan in terms of what's intended to go there.
Yeah.
Is that something that's required by the LUDC?
Mr. Chairman, Commissioners, they have no plans to develop the property at this time. We will catch that on our end administratively once they decide to develop this property. Because at this point, all they want is a zone change. They have no plans right now to develop the property. And what they will have to do before they make the determination to develop the property, they will also have to get an access easement from the adjacent property owner, who, as you can see from the map there, who already has our 14 zoning designation. They will also need to get an access easement from him in order to be able to get to their property, because I didn't see on the documentation that they submitted to me that they have an access easement in order to, develop the land. So at this point, it would be, all they're asking for is just a zone change with, no plans for development. If they did have plans for development, then we would definitely ask for all the things that the LUDC requires, as far as a site plan and layout, access, things like that. But at this point, they're just asking for the annexation and zone change.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions from the commission? Mr. Foster? I should say staff and commission, Mr. Foster.
May I? Thank you. I'll try to answer Commissioner Lee's question. When I've seen it in the past here, that just in the absence of a zone request, just an annexation, it defaults to the lowest possible density while allowing it to be developed. In this case, I'm not sure, maybe RA, R1, R2, something we can build, for example, a single-family home without variances, without nonconformities, those kinds of things. The other part is if this was to be annexed and approved, my perspective is as R14, it's possible they could build something by right that doesn't require any variances, subdivision. They could build an R14 density by right under the code as long as they don't need any special uses or something. So an apartment complex could be there by right after this is approved. So keep that in mind.
Yeah, provided, of course, that they meet all our development standards and, things like that. So,
And Mr. Chair and Commission, this area is pretty intensive. When you look at the high school and the traffic patterns along a major corridor, the Gustorf Road, you do have the apartments in there. The R14 is you could argue that it is compatible with what's around it, at least to the west, in terms of those intensity levels.
Tough neighborhood.
and then also, I'm sure Commissioners, Mr. Chairman, that Matt can also talk to you in regards to the existing Vision 2020 master plan, as I referenced in the staff report, that it does encourage the creation of high-density zoning for affordable housing. And so that's one of the other concepts I was looking at when I wrote my staff report, is that the current Vision 2020 master plan, as it's written, does encourage this type of high-density zoning, where there's existing infrastructure to support it, to allow for affordable housing.
Thank you, Rudy.
Okay, thank you.
Should we go ahead and see if anybody signed up to speak on this case?
Okay, Mr. Chairman, there is nobody who has signed up to speak on this application.
Is there anybody from the audience that would like to speak on this application? None? Okay. With that, I think we can close the public hearing. Any questions or concerns from the commission?
Just a question for staff. Rudy, how did you reconcile the acreage difference? It's 0.65 and 0.67 on the zoning map, and then you come up with...
Mr. Chairman, Commissioner Suazo, that's the addressing.
Oh, that's it.
Yeah, we had just designated that addressing. That's the addresses that we put on those.
Okay.
It's not the lot size. It's
all right.
Yeah.
Look like plots.
That's what I thought.
I guess my thoughts are, it's a big change to go from RA to R14.
Yes.
It does fit within the context. It's not contiguous to other R14. It looks like further up on Gustorf Road, we still transition to county-owned land. So it's basically the border of town of Taos County. And it's basically looking like it's a border from R14 to RA.
Yeah.
So that's a pretty big zone designation. I think, in the past when we've dealt with these, a lot of times we would have recommended some kind of buffer zoning between R14 and RA, something that falls halfway between the two. Seems like a major concern would be access off of Gustorf. The survey that we see doesn't seem like it shows a major access. It looks like there's an easement to the site, but it's 12 feet wide and then 15 feet wide, which is really just kind of a one-way driveway, not a two-way road.
Yeah.
So that's a big change. I think it's just something that I would take caution with, not necessarily that it lends itself one way or the other. It's a small site. 1.4 acres is tough to develop with R14 in terms of setbacks and parking, and all the other constraints we have on a site. And these are long, skinny lots. So,
yeah, and Mr. Chairman and Commissioners, just for point of information, we did change some of the development standards in the R14 zone a couple of years ago, whereas before you had, for example, 40% lot coverage. Now you can have 50% lot coverage. And whereas before you had to have
7, 15, and 20.
Yeah, and instead of 15 in the back, you can only, I think it's 10 feet now in the back. So we did adjust some of those development standards a little bit to make it a little bit more feasible, to allow for as close to 14 units per acre as you can get. But we did make that change a couple of years ago to try to, squeeze in 14 units onto an acre of property.
Right.
So,
Yeah. Okay.
all right.
Those are my thoughts. If there aren't any other questions or concerns from the commission, I would entertain a motion.
Move to approve case number annex /ZC 212-1 and move it to the October 5th meeting based on findings of facts and conditions.
Correct.
Is that December 5th?
December, what did I say?
Sorry. Okay,
December
that's
5th.
right.
Yeah. So for the commission, this is a preliminary public hearing. They'll come back before us one more time. And in this case, if it's deemed a zone change, it would go in front of the town council.
Mr.
After
Chairman?
us.
Yes.
Uh-huh.
For the annexation and the zone change, yes. Both
Okay.
would have to go to town council.
Okay. Okay, do we have a motion? Do we have a second?
Second.
I have 2 seconds. Take your pick, Rudy, as to which one you write down.
Okay.
Anthony.
Okay.
Needs one.
Mr. Chairman, I think it would be prudent to actually make separate motions for each request. One for the annexation, and make a motion on that to approve, and then another one for the zone change requests, just to make it clear.
That sounds right.
Okay.
Motion to approve preliminary hearing on the annexation 2012-1 based on findings of facts and conditions of approval. Move it to the December 5th meeting.
So that is
Motion
one
one.
motion. May we have a second?
Second.
Roll call vote.
Okay.
Mr.
Thank you,
Perea?
Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
Okay. Vice Chairman Lukes.
Yes.
Commissioner Garcia.
Yes.
Commissioner Lee.
Yes.
Commissioner Perez.
Yes.
Commissioner Suazo.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Motion on the zone change?
Motion on the zone change, case number 2012-1, to move it to the final hearing December 5th based on findings of facts and conditions of approval.
Second? Second. Roll call vote?
Okay. Chairman Patterson.
Yes.
Vice Chairman Lukes.
Yes.
Commissioner Garcia.
Yes.
Commissioner Lee.
Yes.
Commissioner Perez.
Yes.
Commissioner Suazo.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. With that, we'll move on to our final public hearings. We have one final public hearing. Rudy, would you please tell us about variance 2012-6?
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mike McMahon, property owner, is requesting a variance from the lot size requirements of an R4 residential zone in order to receive an administrative approval from the town of Taos to divide his property into 2 lots. The subject property is currently 0.329 acres in size and is located at 240 Valverde Street. And let me see here, Mr. Chairman.
Why don't you go ahead and remind us of it's been a little while since we've
Sure.
heard this. So.
Let me go ahead and read you the conditions of approval, should you choose to recommend to grant the variance, and staff's recommendation, should you choose to grant the variance, is at the time the survey plat is created to split the subject property, the applicant put all necessary utility and access easements on the newly created parcel to ensure that it can be properly developed. So that's the condition of approval I have, Mr. Chairman, should the commission make the determination to approve this variance.
Thank you.
Okay.
Does the applicant have anything to add? No? Okay. Rudy, is anybody signed up to speak on this case?
Let's see, Mr. Chairman. No, nobody has signed up to speak on this particular case.
Is there anybody in the audience who'd like to speak on this case? Doesn't look like it. So with that, I think we can close the public hearing portion. Does anybody on the commission have any additional questions or concerns?
I have a question on the LUDC code, on, what is it? 2-4.204 for a variance. On B, it says the applicant has shown good and sufficient cause, and the variance sought is not substantial.
Yes.
This is the substantial, cutting this lot in 2 smaller pieces.
Yes, that is.
Rudy, was there a response to that in your staff report?
Yes, I did. I did say that. Let's see. That it was. He had failed to well, let's see what I'll go ahead and read you what I put in my staff report because it has been a while for me to. With regards to the first portion of this criteria, which is to show a good and sufficient cause, photographic documentation of the residential area surrounding the subject property provided by the applicant has demonstrated that he meets this criteria as evidenced by the older residential construction which exists within the 300-foot public hearing notification area of the subject property, which does not comply with the current development standards of an R4 residential zone. So with that, in my staff report, basically what I said was because of the photographic evidence he showed me and because of the property owner information within that 300-foot area, there's quite a few properties that don't meet the R4 standard of a quarter-acre lot size. And then on to the second part here where the variance sought is not substantial, what I put is, with regards to the second portion of this criteria and as referenced earlier in this report, based on a strict numerical evaluation of the applicant's requests, the variances are a substantial deviation from the R4 residential development standards for lot size. Therefore, the applicant does not meet this portion of the criteria if the commission is going to take this numerical evaluation into consideration as part of making the determination as to whether or not to grant this variance. So that's what I put as far as that criteria goes. It is substantial if you're just strictly looking at numbers, but if you look at the surrounding area, that's something also you can evaluate because a lot of these properties, like I said, don't meet the standard for an R4 zone.
But it's always been that something doesn't set precedence for another.
That's correct, yes.
Another case.
That's correct, Commissioner Perez. Right. So that's where you guys will have to make your interpretation and determination as to, whether or not you agree with my assessment.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Commissioner Perez.
What are your thoughts on that, Commissioner Perez?
My thoughts are it doesn't comply with the requirements.
I could see how you'd make the case that way. I think when we heard this originally, the application that we had in front of us, there's a lot of lots up and down Valverde that are basically a smaller lot size, and I don't think there's many lots up and down Valverde that do comply. So I think for the first time that we heard it, I think a majority of us went with it. It actually kind of fit the surroundings of the neighborhood, not necessarily looking at it as a one independent lot with just assessing it on its own. So I don't feel that it's as big a deviation compared to other lots up and down Valverde Street. Any other thoughts on?
Well, I agree with both of you. But I think we need to create some building sites, again, to bring the cost of housing down in town. And that's by virtue of infill development, high density. And when there's an area where the character of the area are lots of similar size, then I don't really have a problem with it.
Okay. Anybody else?
I mean, my interpretation of this is when somebody wants a variance, something not substantial is they want to move their setback, they want to move their lot line, those things are minimal. This is something that's major.
Oh, you're right. I agree with you.
Am I reading it wrong, or is this, is that our job?
I think it's just how you. I think it basically. I think it just comes down to how you interpret substantial.
Right.
So I think you could make a case
either
one way
way
or the other.
Yeah, either way.
Right. Yeah. Okay.
I think we need to support the high-density development as much as possible. But I think we ought to include the recommendation, alternative recommendation, to include the utilities on each one of the parcels, if I interpret that right.
Okay. You interpret that correctly? Yeah. Okay. And if I don't have any other input, then I would entertain a motion.
Okay. Recommend approval of case number variance 2012-6 based on findings of facts and conditions of approval.
Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Roll call vote?
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Chairman Patterson,
Yes.
Vice Chairman Lukes,
Yes.
Commissioner Garcia,
Yes.
Commissioner Lee,
Yes.
Commissioner Perez,
No.
Commissioner Suazo.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Chairman, we are through with the public hearing portions of the agenda, so I'll turn it over to Mr. Foster to make a presentation to you on the Revision 2020 Master Plan.
Thank you, Rudy. Mr. Chairman and Commissioners, I have some good news and some bad news. The good news is that this could be the second to last presentation I give the Commission on this plan. The bad news is that I have a lot to say this evening. So, with that introduction, here we go. We've heard a lot of the information about this draft plan before, but I know that I was expecting several members of the public to be here, so I did want to take the time, thank you, to revisit some of the issues, the purposes of the plan, the outline of the document, some of the maps, and revisit some of the assumptions and, again, the purposes of the plan. So please bear with me. Just to start off, some of the basic purposes of the plan and why we're doing this is to replace the Vision 2020 master plan one element at a time. A lot has happened since 1999 when Vision 2020 was first adopted. We've had a recession. We've had a lot of development that has occurred since 1999. As I said before, I'm calling this Revision 2020 because I think we need to not only revise the document, but we need to rethink and revision how we're growing and developing and analyze whether or not as a community we're meeting our goals for land use and development. Another purpose of this process and this plan is to really engage the community in a discussion about growth issues and its impacts and some of the solutions. For example, I've taken this visual preference survey, or a VPS, to the community, gotten about 350 responses, and you see the two images on the bottom, some of the results of that, where you show the community various images and you ask them to vote whether or not it's appropriate or very inappropriate for Taos now and into the future. Tabulated that information. So that's just one way to really engage the community about a broader discussion about growth and development and its impacts and what are we going to do about it. Another main purpose is to use this document as a starting place to start coordinating with land use and development and zoning and development standards with Taos County, because we all have a common interest in what happens immediately around the town boundary in terms of infrastructure expansions, agricultural preservation, water resources conservation, growth, development, affordable housing, viewshed, you name it. We all have that in common for sure, even though we have different jurisdictions. Also, another purpose is to utilize all of those previous plans and studies, maps, surveys, all that information that has been done but was never approved as a plan. I often use a lot of these studies to inform my recommendations, but it doesn't have any real enforceability. You can say, well, that's just a study, which is different than a plan. So I've done what I could in this document to really leverage that information, charrettes, plans, maps that weren't, again, always approved as a planning document, but I borrowed from that information to really make it relevant to these decisions. Another main purpose is to help make development decisions more predictable, and I'll talk about that more a little later when I speak about the land use plan and the map and what I'm recommending we do to help landowners and neighborhoods and adjacent property owners and the town council and this commission make more predictable decisions, like on a zone change request, and say, is it consistent with the land use plan map? Yes or no? So I think that gives a lot more certainty to developers, neighborhoods, what they can do on their property and what can happen immediately within their neighborhood. And finally, to establish the goals, policies, and objectives for land use. This is a very typical organization for a comprehensive plan, and I'll be talking about what goals and policies and the objectives really are. A lot of my presentation tonight is to really discuss what these specific objectives are and their priorities. This is a comprehensive plan, and all these issues are supposed to really speak to one another in terms of land use and housing and water resources and transportation and infrastructure. So I wanted to keep that in mind. As I said before, this is taking place in phases. A comprehensive plan has normally just several different elements. Been doing this one at a time so we can get really specific about what we want to do. I think one of the weaknesses of many comprehensive plans across the country is that they're so vague and full of rhetoric that you can't make any decision based on what it says. Our own Vision 2020 says things like, we want to do an inventory of all the natural resources in the county and adopt ordinances to protect them. And it's about as specific as it gets in lots of cases, and that's really nothing to make decisions on. And it gives no direction to the staff. That would, depending on what that really means, it could take millions of dollars and tens of years to really do that. So I'm trying to change that around, and by doing it one element at a time, we can really get specific into a map that's specific to parcels and specific to roadways and to very specific recommendations on how we achieve the goals. So the affordable housing element, which you have seen and had a chance to comment on, that was adopted by the town council in September of this year. The community economic development element was adopted as an interim plan in 2011. It was incomplete intentionally. Matthew Spriggs wrote that plan, and I know it was important to him to have it adopted by the town council because this plan opens the door under the local Economic Development Act, allowing the town to enter into public-private partnerships for economic development purposes, to lease a building, for example, to a private entity for some commercial purpose. Not retail, but we'll talk about that later. But that plan has been adopted, but as an interim plan. There's a lot more work left to be done on that. I was able to get a small grant from the New Mexico Finance Authority, so in the next couple of months we'll be hiring a planning consultant to help finish the plan, and we'll be bringing it back to the commission for your review and approval. I think it was either last month or 2 months ago I did hand out a copy of the plan, so I would ask you to take a look at it. Thank you, Commissioner Suazo. So here we are with the land use element. I'm hoping that this will be reviewed and approved by the town council in December, but it's by no means done. It's, I think, a fairly final draft, but the reason we're here tonight is to talk about it and to take your recommendations and for me to get your direction on changing it or not changing it, and also to hear from the public. Infrastructure is the next element I'm recommending. I would like to have that done by the end of 2013. Also got a small grant to help hire probably a civil engineer and a planning team to help us basically conduct an inventory of the water and sewer systems that we have underground now, to look at the current plans that we have, and to really look at the capacity and age of the infrastructure, where it is, and to match that up with the land use plan under this element. Say, according to this land use element, where do we want to grow, at what density, at what types of uses, and where do we not really want to grow? Where do we want to encourage rural preservation, for example? So we know we're not going to expand water and sewer out there where wells and septic tanks are probably good enough to protect water resources and provide water to the family, but it's just too expensive to expand expensive infrastructure in areas that are designated as rural. Natural resources, I've started that process a little bit and just getting a rough outline that will address the goals, policies, objectives for protecting water, air, and land. I think a lot more information in terms of land conservation than this land use plan will do, but I'm not quite sure what more to tell you about that because it's still kind of evolving in my mind. Then beyond that, parks and recreation, basically where do we want new parks and recreation facilities, trails, formal parks, playgrounds, that kind of thing. And I think this land use element and this land use plan will help set us up to make some of those decisions as far as where's the density going, where should ballparks be, where are the neighborhoods really, how are they going to be organized. My intention here with this land use plan and this park and recreation plan is that every neighborhood, every community within Taos has access to parks and playgrounds and recreation trails, and there's trails and waterways and connections among them. So maybe my kid, when he grows up, he can actually walk to school and feel safe about it. Maybe along an arroyo, along a trail that's lit and has signs, versus walking along the 6-inch crumbling asphalt shoulder of a roadway, and I won't let him do that. So that's part of my vision for the community in terms of the Parks and Recreation plan, to put that in place. Community facilities is really areas like the landfill, police department, fire department, those kinds of public services and facilities that we need as we grow and expand, and to identify where do we need a new police substation if we need one at all. Fire stations, what does that do to our insurance rates and our ability to protect people and their property from fire, given growth and development scenarios. And then finally, historic preservation. I'm suggesting historic preservation is the last priority because I feel like we already have a lot going on with historic preservation now. We have a code, we have a commission, we have an arts and cultural district, we have a historic society, we have a lot of resources in the community to help preserve our history. So I didn't feel that was such a big urgent need as much as land use and infrastructure, for example. And then, sometime around then, I want to expand this in another phase to reach out beyond the town limits. The focus of this land use plan and these plans is just the town limits, and I want to go on to address some of these kinds of issues in the region. So this map here shows basically the town limit, the areas within 1 mile of the town, and then within 3 miles and beyond. So we'll take it in that stage. And that's synchronized with the state statutes. And I'll talk a little bit about that in just a second. Any questions thus far? Okay, good. Really briefly, the organization of the document itself. I wanted to let people in the community know that I didn't make tons of copies of the document, but I did take the time to copy the land use plan portion of it, meaning the map and the definitions of the land use. So when you look at the land use plan map and you say rural, my property is designated as rural, well, what does that really mean? Well, in these sheets here, it's defined. And you can read about what the intention is in terms of designating or allocating these land uses across the community, all the way from the community or the urban center to the suburban and the rural, and defines what I mean by traditional neighborhood development and the clustered land development. So you're welcome to take copies of this. I think this is really the crux of the plan, basically how and where are we allocating land uses and development densities and intensities, and how are we going to achieve that. So anyone's welcome to take a copy here. The plan, the document itself is also on our website, taosgov.org. And if anyone really wants a copy, by all means, I can give you a full version of it and invite you to read all 150 pages if you like. But the document itself, an executive summary, introduction, the purposes of the plan, which I discussed a little bit about the regional setting, how the town and the region has grown and developed with distinct traditional communities, and how sprawl is really affecting that. What I call the legal and political framework. There are state statutes, our own statutes, and politics, and I don't mean that in a bad way, that help shape our decisions on how we're growing and developing and where. And I'll talk a little bit more about that in just a second. There's the vision. I think a good comprehensive plan, especially in land use, really starts with the vision. I described the vision of the Taos County Comprehensive Plan, the Vision 2020 Master Plan. I'll make reference to the survey work that I've done. Also talk about what I call the anti-vision. I hear a lot from the community of the kind of place that we don't want to be, which is called Española. Just trying to give a broader kind of, vision for some of these decisions and the goals. I'm going to talk a lot more, again, about the trends and challenges and the assumptions that I've made and some of the studies that I've done that lead me to the recommendations of the plan. And then the goals, policies, and objectives. Then the land use plan itself, the map. And then an appendix. I have a copy of a lot of data that I've collected and the actual visual preference survey itself and so on. So the legal and political framework. I'm happy to say this is going a lot faster than I thought, so we're getting there. State statute says you have to do a comprehensive plan. It says that the commission will adopt what they call a master plan, and it will establish, the master plan for physical development of the municipality and the area within the planning and platting jurisdiction of the municipality. And the planning and platting jurisdiction, according to the statutes for a town of the size of Taos, it says 3 miles. It says you shall do it. So therein lies the politics. We have to work with the county on what does that really mean, and who does planning, who does subdivision, who does zoning, who does building permits, who does code enforcement, those kinds of things. And in this planning document, I lay out some options there that I hope would go to the county commissioners, and between the town council and the county commissioners, we all agreeing who does what within the town, within 1 mile of the town, within 3 miles of the town, and outside of the town. State statute also requires that zoning be in accordance with a comprehensive plan. So, for example, our own code, the Land Use Development Code, says a zone change must be consistent with the master plan. So we have to make the connection between the plan and the day-to-day or monthly decisions for zone changes and annexations and that kind of thing. So trying to, through this planning document, establish what we really want to do and how we want to change the code so we can evaluate these case-by-case applications and future code amendments to say, yes, it is consistent, or no, it isn't, or maybe it is, and make a decision in moving forward. Also, again, the collaboration with the Taos County and who does what for annexation, zoning, subdivision standards, neighborhood plans, and the approval process, again, of who approves what. And then finally, our own Land Use Development Code has laws and requirements for making development decisions. So I think all of these things have been described and analyzed in the plan as a framework for why are we really doing this, and what must be done, and what can be done between the town and the county. So moving on unless there's any questions this far, I want to talk about, spend some time on the trend, what I call the trends and the challenges that I have seen through my own experience, reading previous plans, my own observations out in the community, having heard a lot from community groups. I know a lot of individuals and groups are represented here tonight that I've met with, and just doing a lot of listening as to what the concerns are, but also trying to analyze data and really challenge my own assumptions and see what the real trends and challenges are as they relate to land use. Demographic changes will require new development patterns. This was a really hard one for me because I frankly have not been able to really get a strong grasp of what's happening with our population. This graph suggests that it's growing. These numbers were done before the recession. Shows that it's going to be growing but at a decreasing rate. I met with an economist who has been really helpful with me, and he says the population is going to start decreasing. And then I talk to other professionals, and they say it's really going to start increasing. Why? Well, because climate change. There's going to be urban refugees wanting to move to places like Taos and escape Phoenix and escape Los Angeles and escape Houston, and Taos is a great place. So there's a lot of reasons why someone would want to come here. So they predict that it's going to increase. Then job growth. We don't have a lot of jobs in Taos or in Taos County, so some people are going, I'm going to go to Albuquerque. I can't quite give you a good solid prediction. But it does have an impact on land use and development decisions, especially when you look at the aging population. The graphic on the right shows every 10-year increments on how the population in Taos has been growing. We're almost average age of 50. So that has, I think, a lot of implications on land use and development and the density of housing, the accessibility of housing, and transportation choices, and the size of a family. You know, the graying of America, well, we have definitely the graying of Taos. And you don't have to be 50 to start getting gray, by the way. You can be much younger. Yes, Commissioner Lee.
What do you define as the region?
The region is from the regional water plan. It is basically the kind of the core central area of Taos County. It includes the Pueblo, the town of Taos, Ranchos de Taos, Upper Las Colonias, Lower Las Colonias, Cañon. Basically, the what I think of as the valley here. Not Amalia, not Peñasco, not Picaris Pueblo. The next one, the trend and challenge, is present this more as a challenge to all of us, that infill should accommodate new growth. Instead of keep on growing outward, we need to make better use of the undeveloped land that we have in town already. That's basically, in lots of places, a lot of flat sagebrush that has infrastructure within a reasonable distance. So we should put in incentives and policies that encourage developers to develop within the core of town rather than spreading out. This map shows all of the white areas of undeveloped land as of a few years ago. There's quite a bit of undeveloped land that we need to make use of within the town already. Infrastructure budget is in a deficit. Every year I work with the department directors in what we call an infrastructure capital improvements plan. And there's usually between 60 to 80 infrastructure projects on that list, somewhere between $65 and $80 million. And I suspect as we grow and develop, especially if we continue to sprawl, it's only going to get worse. So I think this also is really closely related, in my mind, to the infill challenge, that we need to make better use of the infrastructure that we already have for the sake of our budget. Unless somebody has $80 million that they're willing to give to the town for cop cars and water and sewer lines. The attorney is, he's writing a check right now. It's serious. It's serious. So again, basically the recommendation, as we'll talk about, is we should provide incentives for making more efficient use of the road and water and sewer systems and drainage facilities that we already have because of a growing infrastructure budget deficit.
How does the town infrastructure budget relate to the county's infrastructure budget?
I'm afraid I don't know. I would imagine that the counties, depending on they have a much broader scope. They do different services than the town does, but then again, we have a library, so I'm not really sure, for example. Another challenge, the transportation system should accommodate multiple users. Now we have basically a transportation system and development standards and traffic studies that are completely addicted to the automobile. I'd like to reverse that trend, and as we grow and develop and we approve subdivisions and development projects, we're designing our roadways, and we have new development standards to make trailways, to make trail connections, to recognize that some people can't always drive, or they don't want to always drive. You know, the elderly, a lot of the youth in the community, they don't have access to a car, but they still need to get around, so maybe they can get around by bus or a skateboard or by a trail or a bicycle, for example. I want to make that an option, not that the car is always the only option.
Matt, I think you had a question or a comment. I don't know if you want to wait till the end for any comments.
I'll be happy to.
Sir, did you have a comment? Yeah.
Just, it's hard for us to hear unless the commissioners speak into your mics, if they're on.
Gotcha.
For instance, we didn't hear Mr. Lee's question just a second ago, or at least I didn't.
Justin, your question was?
My question was, what's the relationship between the infrastructure budget of the town and the infrastructure budget of the county?
And Matt's answer was, I don't know. Ma'am, go ahead.
This plan does contemplate something like that for sure.
So I think the question was, would there be impact fees
Yeah,
associated with newer development?
I think the town ought to look at that as an option, not the only option. There's a lot of legal requirements at the state level to do that. Feasibility studies and ordinances and so on can be quite an expensive and politically challenging process for sure. But it is an option, absolutely. Well, I'll talk a little bit later about one of the goals. One of the goals of the plan is that development pays for itself. So as new development comes in, they ought to be able to pay for the infrastructure requirements required by their project. An impact fee is money paid out by the developer for the impacts of the project off of their lot. Like some would pay a few $100s or maybe a few $1,000s to help pay for a cop.
Or
because
traffic.
that police officer is required by the new people that are living in that new housing project, for example. Or I think library might be an eligible use. Roads is, I think, without a doubt, in my mind, the number one use of an impact fee. But it's for development impacts off the property.
Thank you.
Sprawl is unsustainable. Put this map up there. It looks like we've, in my opinion, again, I know you've seen this image many, many times. Those two black images on the left. Sprawl has, I think, overrun the traditional charm and character of Taos. And one thing I'm hoping to do with this plan, from what I've heard from lots of people in the community and professional planners, and the official documents of the town and the county, we want to get back to this traditional pattern of development, something like what we see in the historic district, not just a development pattern of single-family homes and subdivisions that really don't have any amenities, or if they do, they're really not cared for. And on the surrounding areas is these isolated office complexes. So we're trying to make literal roadway connections, but also some sort of design standards through roadways and densities that really unify an area rather than separate it all the time. Buffers and setbacks and big parking lots. And trying to, new development should enhance existing neighborhoods is another challenge. I put this image up, and I know it's hard to see. I'm sorry, it's kind of dark in here. This was a rendering from the late David DeChico of possible affordable housing development at Chimisa Verde, and I think he really did a great job in really displaying a type of development that really is a neighborhood in and of itself, but has green space and diversity of housing and something that I see could really enhance that neighborhood out there. Rural open space and farms are at risk to new development. Studied quite a bit some of the very old agricultural census data way back when the country was started. I think it was literally George Washington who wanted a census of the amount of farms that are in the country. And so I was able to find some of this data. It's spotty, obviously, as you can see, but the trend line is pretty clear. We're losing farms, and I'm not a farmer myself, so it's easy for me to say. I could barely grow a garden in my backyard, but I know that the farming and agricultural traditions here are very important, not only because of the jobs and the connection to the land and the agrarian kind of traditions here, but also for the preservation of kind of rural Taos. It doesn't do any good to have fallow agricultural land. I want to see that this is in productive use, not just waiting to be developed by the next person who has an idea. Right. And this is an image of the undeveloped lot, the agricultural land, fallow land in El Prado that was the subject of a lot of controversy some time back over the Family Dollar. It's a beautiful landscape, and in my opinion, and it ought to be preserved that way. So it's a challenge that we faced very recently about losing these landscapes to development. this one has been a hot topic, and the current draft that you have seen is on our website. It's a very different language, but after talking to representatives of the Taoseños Against Walmart Superstore and other community groups who read the plan, it used to say that the challenge was the population will attract a new big box. And so it took some convincing, but I was eventually convinced that I should change the language because the response was very negative, and that I was trying to say that we're trying to attract a big box, that it's inevitable, it's going to happen, so we might as well just accept it. And so I started thinking about what my recommendation really is. And for me, it's not so much that the economics of the issue. I have some thoughts about that, but in terms of land use and development standards and development patterns, it's more the physical form of the big box building, and also other types of commercial developments I've seen, especially on the south side of town. We've had Walgreens and the Applebee's. We have an Aaron's Rent-A-Center coming up. And lots of other development over the years that I think and other people have shared with me very passionately that the character of Taos is getting lost. So I changed the language from the population will attract a new big box to the unique character of Taos is being lost to national retail developments. And this isn't just me. And I could tell you, and I believe I've quoted it several times in the document, that the Town of Taos 1963 comprehensive plan basically says the same exact thing. The 1972 plan says the same thing. The 1989 plan. So it's this trend that we've experienced. And everyone seems to agree we don't like it. But nonetheless, there it is. So my job is to put these plans in place to try and reverse that trend through code amendments. And these are images of actual projects we've seen at our DRC, and before I got here, the one on the bottom right is the super Walmart that was proposed. And I don't think it takes much. You have to be a planner or a landscape architect or a developer to say that does not represent the character, the unique character of Taos that we want. Talking about the form of the development and the building. We're all free to have our opinions about the economics of that, and I encourage that, and that's fine. My perspective is the form of development and what I've seen, and what I see is a trend, and I hear that should be reversed.
How do we keep or get grocery receipts continue to come to Taos without losing Taos? That's the fine line right there, is getting grocery receipts without losing the integrity of Taos.
Yeah. Well, there's I think lots of ways to do that. Small businesses. There's lots of ways. I can't. I would like to maybe defer that question for economic development planning. I'm trying to focus on the form of the building. That's a whole other presentation. I know there's lots of people here for sure would like to address that issue, but
My question is, what are we looking at up there? What's the one on the left? And then I think I understand what you're saying about the one on the right. I don't know what the one on the left represents.
this is a former development proposal that we saw in our department a few years back. I believe this was a Lowe's. I think that was like 80,000 square feet, I believe. These are not similar scale. This was the Super Walmart, 183,000 square feet. I think it was 182, 181. That was in 1989, 92. And these were basically unidentified, outbuildings. Probably, I would guarantee it would be a restaurant, a couple fast foods, a gas station, all those typical kinds of developments that you see, a shoe depot, those kinds of pad developments that you see out there. I want to say this too. I've also taken this issue out to lots of other community groups. I give the example of our own facilities services department. I gave a very similar presentation within the department. The very first question I got asked was, when do we get a super Walmart to Taos? So I know I'm kind of balancing both sides of this issue. So I know there's a lot of people in the community who really want it here and make the economic arguments about gross receipts tax and, well, they're going to move to the county and what happens then and so on. So, again, the focus here for me in this plan is the development standards of the building. There's other ways in the economy besides, retail that we can look to diversify and expand. Agriculture, natural resource, renewable energy. We have an economic development plan that addresses that for sure. Moving on to goals, policies, and objectives. This is something that I've already presented a little bit to the commission, but again, I wanted to let the community know and the audience here know how I've organized the recommendations of the plan. Goals, policies, and objectives. A goal is basically a statement that describes the desired future condition. What do you want your future to be like? That's what it says. And it's an expression of the values of the community. A policy elaborates more specifically on the intentions and interpretation of what the goal really is. You can say we want to preserve natural resources. Well, the policies explain in more detail what you really mean and how you plan on going about doing it. And a policy you take a policy statement and apply it to a specific circumstance or a project. I describe in the plan a hypothetical development project of a subdivision development. It was clustered. The developers talked about affordable housing, maybe committing to doing that, and open space dedication. But this clustered subdivision was in a rural fallow farmland. So the comprehensive plan policy says preserve rural farmland, but it also says encourage cluster development. So they're competing policies right there. So you apply them to the specific circumstances and the letter of the law, and you have to make a decision in balancing these sometimes competing policy statements. An objective is something far more specific and measurable. It's a specific task or a project that's necessary to achieve the goal and fulfill the policy. It's something that you know when you've done it. An objective is adopt an ordinance. Well, we have an ordinance that's been adopted. Adopt a plan or a map. Well, you have a map and it was done. A policy or a goal, you're not always sure that, yeah, we absolutely definitely did that. Those are more ongoing, kind of growing, evolving issues in the community because the values change, the circumstances change, the leadership changes, and so the goals and the policies change as well. And it takes place in this hierarchy. You have the goal, and then to fulfill your goal, you have your policies, which you apply, and then your specific objectives. So basically, if you're achieving your objectives, you're fulfilling the policy, and ultimately over whatever period of time, you're accomplishing your goal, and then you have new goals. So these are the 6 goals that are outlined in the land use element. One is that natural resources are protected from development. We want to preserve, air, land, water. The second one is agricultural land is in productive use and protected from inappropriate development. I added that productive use part because I think the town can have a role in not just saying no to development on farmland, but also being more active in seeing that the farmland is being farmed. The third is that the town develops as a collection of complete and compact neighborhoods. Fourth is that special districts are planned, designed, developed according to their unique impacts, needs, and opportunities, like industrial districts in the airport, for example, areas that don't really fit within this sort of neighborhood kind of concept that I've been describing. It's complete, it's compact, there's a little bit of everything. There's parks and trails, there's a diversity of housing, there's a post office, you can do a little bit of shopping, you can have access to school and daycare, all within the same neighborhood. But an industrial district probably doesn't fit within that, or an airport doesn't fit within a neighborhood. It has its unique impacts and needs, so there should be a plan for that. The fifth is that development pays for itself. And then finally, 6 is development decisions are predictable, transparent, and inclusive. This is more a goal about the development process versus, where does development go? Well, how do we keep the community informed about our development decisions and so that they are predictable and transparent and include all voices? I'm not going to talk about the policies because, I don't know, I'm already running on 20 or 30 minutes maybe here, and there's dozens of them. But I would invite you and encourage you and anyone in the community to read them because they are important because they are less specific than the objectives, but they should provide some basis for staff reports, for your decisions. Do we approve this annexation or not? Well, what about what did our policies say about it? How do we balance these policies out?
Matt, if I could interrupt you for one
Yeah.
minute, can you go back to the previous slide? I think just in terms of goals, I think numbering them gives the sense that one's more important than the other. So I'm not sure if it's a conscious thought or not, but if our number one goal wants to be natural resources are protected from development, so I think if that's an intention, I think that's fine. But I think just having goals and numbering them gives priority one over the other. So just make sure it's
Okay.
an intentional priority.
It is not.
Okay. Then maybe bullet points would be more effective
Okay.
or something that doesn't necessarily give it a number one goal and a number two goal.
The reason I put it this way is because I'm borrowing from this the transect. We go all the way from
Yeah.
pristine nature
Right.
to agricultural land and rural environments, and then neighborhoods where you see more development. So that's why, but
Yeah.
they're not intended to be priority goals.
Okay.
But the objectives are, and that's what I'm talking about now.
Okay. They're not numbered.
They are, and they're not, but they are dated.
Okay, go ahead.
They are numbered on the memo I gave you last month. And I'd be happy to share this with anyone. This is information that I gave to the Planning Commission on October 3rd as to my recommendations as to the actual priorities of all these projects and code amendments and master plans and neighborhood plans and impact fee ordinances and so forth. So the objectives, the plan right now as it is and what I'm recommending is, so by the end of 2013, these things ought to be done. So basically a year and 1 month from now, assuming the town council ultimately adopts this plan. And I would ask you to please keep in mind, this isn't the only plan we have. We have the housing plan, we have the economic development plan, we have other elements of the plan that need to be done, and we have some very limited resources. So you might think that, wow, this is going to take 7 or 8 years. Well, yeah, in the context of all these other objectives that we have, build out Chamisa Verde, right? Build affordable housing for artists, 80 units. A lot of work to be done there. So my number one recommendation is adopt the land use map as an ordinance. I'll talk a little bit about that in a second, what that really means and how I've described it in the plan. Adopt an ordinance that requires consistency between plans and budgets so that, for example, our capital improvements plan, our annual budget needs to be consistent with the 5-year infrastructure budget. That a master plan for a neighborhood should be consistent with the comprehensive plan. That a staff report would have a finding of consistency. That, if there's a zone change application, there has to be a finding of consistency. That, yes, it is consistent. And what level is it consistent? So that we're really building this into the process. So that we're doing what we say we're going to be doing. To prepare a joint powers agreement with Taos County to establish the roles and responsibilities for collaborative land use planning in the region. This refers back to the comments earlier of the framework for the state statutes that say we have a planning and platting jurisdiction and we shall exercise it. Well, we need to figure out what that really means between the town and the county as to, again, who does what for land use planning and neighborhood overlay zones and subdivision review within 1 mile or within 3 miles. So we really need to work collaboratively with the county to, I imagine it would be a joint powers agreement or some other, document between the two entities. Adopt and implement the recommendations of the Climate Adaptation Plan. The Climate Adaptation Plan is a document I prepared with the Rocky Mountain Youth Corps. I worked with a group called the Model Forestry Policy Program and Climate Solutions University. This was more of a regional plan. It starts with this basic assumption that we are experiencing global climate change, and it is caused by human activity, and we need to adapt to it. We're going to have more severe rainstorms in higher concentrations in Taos County. We're going to have less snowfall. We're going to have more dust. We're going to have migration of different species coming in. We have greater risk of fire, and if the forest fire occurs, when it occurs, different species will start to take over. So what that might mean, for example, and what I mean by implementing the recommendations, is we should look at our storm drainage standards and sizes of culverts. All those calculations might need to be redone because we might need a bigger culvert because we're going to expect a bigger rainstorm because of climate change. That's the idea. So this climate adaptation plan is full of recommendations for updating plans and standards to anticipate climate change, the risk for fire. So this plan is trying to be collaborative and working with, the town would work with the Forest Service and the county and the Issaquah associations and the water associations. We might need to really double our efforts in water conservation because why drought? Provide public education and design assistance. You're going to see this on all of them because I think our department, specifically through our Development Review Committee, our website, staff meetings, we need to really provide information to property owners and developers before they commit to buying to a particular plan. We need to educate them about their options to preserve natural resources and rural areas. Not a lot of developers or consultants know that we have a rural historic overlay zone or density bonuses for affordable housing. So if they don't know that, they're just going to, I think, go with the standard default, whatever the code says we can do. But if we educate them and at least give them the information, make it accessible to them, it might fit their needs a little bit better and service the community better. The objectives for, not 2104, 2014, excuse me. Adopt a green infrastructure map and the associated land dedication and riparian protection ordinances. I've been working on a green infrastructure map ever since I got here, and I think it's about time we formalize that. We have an open space dedication requirement on our code now, and over the years I've seen it work and not work. We have some developments that they propose a gazebo in the middle of the parking lot or in the back end of the project, and no one's going to use it. So instead of something like that, I'd like to see us map out our green infrastructure, trails, parks, riparian corridors, wildlife corridors, acequias. So if what I'm proposing we do with this objective and this map and these ordinances, that we have a map adopted along with the ordinance that says this is our open space dedication, that if your development falls within the green infrastructure, that's your open space dedication. And if you're a single family lot or a smaller subdivision or a big subdivision that has no green infrastructure worth preserving, then you pay a fee to help us acquire and plan and design and maintain the open space that we say is valuable through this process. So we're not requiring a developer to dedicate open space that frankly has no value to anyone. Adopt a downtown master plan. This is a higher priority because we have funding now through the Arts and Cultural District and the New Mexico Main Street to do a master plan for the downtown. I'll be putting out a request for proposals in the next couple of months to hire a consultant to help us do that. I think it's important because even if we didn't have the money, I think it would be a high priority because of the tourism economy and the impacts of tourism and what it does to local families and jobs. A lot of people are dependent upon tourism for jobs. And tourism, I automatically think of the downtown. The people do a lot of other things when they come to the community, but one thing that I think a lot of them do is, hey, let's go check out the plaza. So that's another reason why I think it's a higher priority. Adopt an Issaquah restoration plan. Adopt a master plan for the Taos Regional Airport. I believe there's some funding available to the town now, and I know that's getting a lot of momentum. So I think that's a high priority, not only for the safety of the pilots in terms of the crosswind runway and so forth, but also economic development potential for leasing space on and near the airport. Amend the Land Use Development Code development standards for large-scale in other words, big box development. I already talked about that. I would say that the plan does, I believe, get pretty specific as to what I really mean by that. It just doesn't say, adopt a downtown master plan. I describe what is a downtown master plan, what ought to be included in the downtown master plan, and so forth. I give many, many bullet points of how I recommend that we change the development code for large-scale development or big box. Then to create a comprehensive and searchable database that utilizes GIS for decision to support. Decision support is like, do we approve the annexation or subdivision or not? We have the information on the map to tell us where the infrastructure is so we can make a better decision about subdivisions and basic development. And to monitor development applications and code violations. This is also, I think, a very valuable tool for all of us on the staff. We can put this information out to the public. So if I have a piece of property and I'm a developer and I'm trying to figure out what I might want to do with it, the town, through this GIS program, can provide a lot of valuable information. My idea, concept is, and it's not new, it's not mine, a lot of communities do it. You get on the web, you click on your parcel, it'll give you the zoning standards, it'll give you all the information that you need to help you make a decision about, do I do a developer or not? Should I really do the zone change application or not? How far am I from water and sewer? That kind of basic information that leads into a pro forma and a development application. Also, for example, if we have, a subdivision approval, what is it, Rudy? A summary subdivision. You can subdivide, but you can't do it again within 5 years.
Yeah, are you talking a lot split or
a lot transfer?
Split.
You do a lot split, but you can't do another lot split within 5 years. So you can, with this type of system, we can click on the lot and say, you can't do that for another 5 years. So it doesn't get lost in the back end of a staff report. So we can make better decisions about it. I think that's a very valuable tool for us. So we can know on a map, again, property owners, areas where there may be a concentration of code violations, so we know where to focus our efforts, for example. And getting to George's question, identify public finance alternatives to help pay for infrastructure, like impact fees, bonds, gross receipts taxes, business improvement districts, tax incremental finance. We have a lot of this information already in our cultural plan for the Arts and Cultural District. And the economic development element that I talked about earlier, we're going to be taking a look at that is what areas of town have real serious infrastructure needs and how can we help pay for it, either through the developers or bonds, taxes. There's a lot of tools out there enabled by the state legislation that are available to us. We just need to really study which one is best where. And they all have different requirements. Some have requirements for just the town council can vote and it's done. Others require a full referendum of all the voters in the community. So there's different legal and political procedures for implementing those public finance tools. And again, provide public education and design assistance, something that we should always be doing. The objectives for 2015, annex properties that are receiving town services, implement the 2007 annexation strategic plan study. Next is amend the high performance building ordinance. I'm not real satisfied myself as the manager of this ordinance of how it's set up. I'd like to improve that. We haven't had a lot of building permits for commercial buildings ever since it was adopted, but I think it needs to be improved. And I talk about exactly why in the plan. I don't want to take too much time here, but amend the land use development code to repair suburban sprawl, trying to encourage, for example, new roadway connections, to introduce densities in some areas that where people in the neighborhood want quicker access to services and businesses instead of just single-family subdivisions and strip malls. Amend the land use development code to incentivize infill and redevelopment. This could be, for example, the streamlining issue that I see. My concept here is that we, in the development code or as a separate ordinance, we have a map that designates the different parcels as infill parcels. And to develop under your current zoning, you have one hearing, not two, not three. So the first public hearing is when the town council adopts the map and the ordinance. Says to the community, here's the parcels that we're identifying as infill. We're also maybe going to subsidize water and sewer hookups or reduced fees. And we're going to give you one public hearing, not two or three. To incentivize time and money incentives for the developer to build on lots that should be developed versus lots outside on the fringe. Because why? Well, that's rural Taos. And then again, public education and design assistance. The objectives for 2016, adopt a master plan for the industrial districts. There's areas of town behind Walmart especially that are now zone M1 that are a mess. They're a mess. There's residential, there's everything you could possibly imagine, and it really needs some help. And also to zone that area, so if you're not rural, suburban, and so forth, if you want to develop a higher impact industrial development, you can't do it in a subdivision. You've got to buy your land in the industrial district. Adopt a food security master plan, adopt neighborhood plans, form-based codes, neighborhood associations, adopt form-based codes for the neighborhood plans where it's desirable. The form-based code is we use the SMART code if you've been around for that. Then facilitate economic and business development initiatives that support the full spectrum of agriculture. Growing, harvesting, processing, packing, transporting, marketing, consuming, disposing of food. This comes from a food systems report that we got a couple of years back from Collaborative Green, and kind of addressing the issue I mentioned earlier, that it's one thing to preserve land, but it's another thing for the town to change its zoning and to really participate in the food economy, make it easier to grow food. 2017. The plan calls for an update of the land use plan every 5 years. So by the time 2017 rolls around, it'll be time to update the plan. You can tell I'm losing some of you. Adopt a transfer development rights program. Amend the code for protecting agricultural land and to encourage agriculture and gardening, so that if you want to do a decent-sized garden or have a couple of hens or chickens in your subdivision, you can do it. It's just not a big deal to have to have eggs in your own neighborhood. Okay. I'm almost done. Update the greenhouse gas emissions inventory. Again, then this just repeats. Continue to adopt neighborhood plans, to form neighborhood associations to represent those neighbors, form-based codes where they're desirable, and an ongoing process of facilitating business and economic development programs for agriculture. And again, public education. This is all repeating the same stuff. By this time, I'll be gone and we won't even have to worry about it. I'm almost there, I promise. The land use plan map. This map, I do need to make some changes to it, specifically to the civic space portion of it. I mentioned earlier that my number one objective coming out of this plan is to adopt this map as an ordinance, and this table would be the companion to the ordinance. So if this ordinance were to be adopted by the commission and the council, if any property owner in the town wanted to change their zoning, they must do it according to the map and the chart. So if you're in a designated suburban area and you want to change your zoning, you must change the zoning to only a suburban type of zone, like an R1, R2, and R3, kind of mid-range, low residential development like you see in the suburbs. So the next steps, finally. The next couple of months, I'm going to be continuing my public outreach. I've presented this plan to the Aseki Association, the Association of Realtors, the library staff, the facilities department staff, the Planning and Zoning Commission. I want to have an open house where I'm available all day long, instead of punching cookies where I'm boring everyone to death with yet another Matt Foster PowerPoint. I'm just there all day. You come in on your own time and you ask your specific questions. I have presentations that I hope I would invite you or anyone to, I'll come into your living room, I'll come into your business and give a much shorter and abridged version of this presentation. I did warn you about the bad news, right, that I had a lot to say tonight. But the restaurant placemats is something I want to do and will be doing in the next couple of weeks, is take the map as an 11 by 17 sheet of paper and ask some of the local restaurants if I could use that as a placemat, so when people, I think mostly locals, are eating, they can say, hey, wow, the town is doing a land use plan, and that's my piece of property. What does he mean by suburban? I better call Mr. Foster. So that's one thing I want to do, to try and get the word out as much as possible. Print and radio media, I have an interview tomorrow with the Taos News, for example, for an article. I've been on the radio a number of times and will continue to do that. Specifically to announce the next dates of the commission meeting. On December 5th, I'm going to ask the commission to tell me what you think. You adopt a resolution endorsing the plan and sending it up to the council or not, or something in between. Then finally, the town council presentations are scheduled for November 27th, where I'll be giving a very similar presentation, and then December 11th, hopefully if all goes well between now and then, to ask them to adopt it. And between now and then, I'll be making some text and map revisions. There's some things that I've been working on that I'm not quite thrilled with. But between now and then, I'll have it in your hands, the final, clean, 100% version. And most of my presentation next time will be telling you what those changes are. Nothing that I can see right now to really alter the course of this plan at all. And that's my presentation, Commissioners.
Good job, Matt.
Thank you.
So again, I have copies of the sections of the plan and the map and the definitions of the land uses, and I'll be happy to take your questions or invite anyone from the public, if you like, either to meet with me individually or, don't mean to take away the microphone, Mr. Chairman, but if anyone wanted to ask me your questions about it, now is the time.
And the land use plan is primarily the map and the zoning designations. Is that right?
The plan portion, yes.
Yep.
Yeah. I mean, there's a lot more of the goals and objectives and the trends
Right.
and so on, the whole document. But the plan of what are we going to do and how are we allocating land uses is in these sections.
And that really seems like one of the biggest hurdles to get over, because it really kind of redefines what we know is our zoning today, right?
It gives a framework, the parameters for zone changes. If
Yep.
the town council adopts this on December, it doesn't change the zoning. It would just put us in a place to recommend an ordinance that says if you want to change your zoning, but by the ordinance, it has to be within these parameters of rural and suburban and urban center, or the traditional neighborhood development.
But it doesn't change any of the existing zoning.
No.
It only gives you a roadmap for how to change. where to go.
One thing that we will need to address, and it's in the land use development code right now, one of the criteria for a zone change is it must be consistent with the master plan. So this would replace that. So we would look at it and say, is it consistent or not? Is it a rural zone? Is it not? So I'm recommending that we have the separate. I don't know that we have to do that, because the LUDC says that one of the criteria is must be consistent with the plan. And if this replaces the plan, then there you go. I would like to be a little more explicit than that and take it to a public hearing and give it that extra effort.
How far away are you from having the land use plan as an ordinance ready to be reviewed?
Oh, that would be, I want to get the plan approved by the council first, and then that would be, for me, I think it's ready to go. It would be, if I get the nod from the town council, and I'll ask them explicitly, and similar here, that my number one recommendation is to adopt this map as an ordinance, that it would be, advertised and gone to this commission, and I would work with the legal staff in writing the ordinance and making sure that it's very crystal clear what this does.
Okay.
As far as defining what a zone change application can only be approved if.
Right. And are you bringing that plan? Are you bringing the plan portion of that in front of us next month to be
Yes.
approved?
I'm going to be asking you to adopt a resolution that approves the plan.
Okay.
Not the ordinance, not any of the ordinances or the
Right.
recommend,
And that's the plan you're handing out tonight. There's a copy of it.
that was just a portion of the plan.
Okay.
The full plan document is on the town's website,
Yep.
www.taosgov.com. I could probably pull it up here, as a matter of fact.
And will that plan be distributed to us prior to next month's
Yes,
meeting?
I have some
Okay.
a little bit more mapping to do. Want to update some of the text a little bit. So, if I could have maybe 3 weeks, I will get you and on the website and anyone that wants a copy, what I'll call the final version, unless you tell me, Matt, don't do this at all, or something different.
Yeah. And the document you handed us last month was the Community and Economic Development Plan,
Yes.
and that was the ordinance that was passed, and you'd be proposing a revision and an update to that
Correct.
plan. But that wouldn't be. Where's that fall on your schedule? Is that after the?
The update and completion of the economic development element will be complete by the end of 2013. I
Okay.
have a request for proposals out now.
Uh-huh.
We have a grant to help
So it's the
finish
land
that.
use plan first, and then
Then economic development
community economic
and
development.
infrastructure also.
Okay. Great. Thank you for the timeline. Thank you for the steps to move through and pulling it off piece by piece. I think it's more than we've ever had up to this point. We've only had the 2020 and not an implementation plan for how to get there. So, thank you for that.
I didn't know how else to cram, dozens of
Map it
projects
out and-
into a. Yeah, there it is.
Yeah, lay out a sequence. So, I appreciate that, and I know that everybody else does as well. Yeah. Thank you. We'll look forward to the land use plan for next month. Yeah. Any other comments or?
You want us just to stand here?
I think that's probably fine for a presentation format. We're not in a public hearing. Yeah.
My name is Fritz Hahn, and I want to thank you, Mr. Chairman,
Uh-huh.
and commissioners, for your citizens' work. Great to see you. I also want to thank Mr. Myers and Rudy and the Planning and Zoning Department, and particularly Matt Foster for his labors.
Mr. Hunt, on second thought, we're on community TV, so I think if you actually step up here, then viewers on TV would be able to see you and hear you as well.
Okay? Do I need to repeat that? Let's go to people.
Yeah, let's go ahead and step up in front of the microphone.
Okay.
Thank
So I
you.
want to thank you, Mr. Chairman. My name is Fritz Hahn, Taos against the Walmart Superstore, and commissioners, and thank you for your service work. Mr. Moyers and Rudy, Planning and Zoning Department, thank you. And most especially, thank you to Matt for all of his efforts. I don't know if that's our new manager over there, but howdy do.
That's our new town attorney. His name is Brian
Okay,
James.
very good. Welcome. Gee, it was 10 years ago, almost to the day, that the Taos News took a picture of Gus Cordova with 10,000 bogus signatures saying it's a done deal. We want a super box. And Mr. Foster, with all due respect, one town employee in a captive audience stating that when are we going to get a super box, though an accurate portrayal is a little bit misleading. In fact, in 2003, when then Mayor Fred Peralta left for Santa Fe and Mayor Bobby Duran took over and was dealing with this quandary, he, with suggestions, came upon the solution of a citywide referendum, a paper ballot mailed to all citizens in the town of Taos. And I want to make it really clear that at that time, every household got a paper ballot. Those that cared responded. And the results were this. 60% of the people of the town of Taos opposed the construction of a big box. 60%. A year ago, almost to the day, we heard again about the council considering revisions to the Land Use Development Code. we began getting our citizens together, organized a meeting, and I think Mr. Moyers, that may have been your...
Mr. Morris?
Morrison, I'm sorry.
Mr. Morris.
I just know him as Bill. Doggone it. Sorry about that, Mr. Morrissey. And we had a meeting of concerned citizens, and there were developers in the crowd. Many of them we know. A well-attended meeting. Interestingly enough, just before that meeting, Mayor Cordova rescinded the support to revisit the limitations and revisions of that LUDC 1 year ago. You both were there. I may not have the quotes exactly right. Many of us were there that night. This evening, I'm hearing about, and I was on the website, I've been on the website a lot. I haven't seen the latest version of this revision 2020, but the May revision is a little bit of a concern. And when I was listening to Mr. Foster's presentation tonight, of course, I am concerned when 60% of our fellow citizens are opposed to inappropriate predatory development, that the town, once again, would be willing to consider revision of the LUDC. How much does it take? How many more people do we have to run for office? How many more people do we need to boot out? We're tired of this. I am going to ask you commissioners and Mr. Foster and the town council to slow down a little bit here. This timeline, and I realize Matt's been working on this for quite some time, but having you all go up or down on December 5th in a document this big and this important, having a presentation to the town council on the 27th, I think is worthwhile, but cautions to them that let's not be too hasty here, and then an up or down vote from them by December 11th. By George, we've got 30 days. It seems a little bit unreasonable. So as a citizen, I'm going to ask you to slow down, and here are a couple reasons why. Matt had talked about some of the language. Some of the language in the May document was very disconcerting. There were statements in there like increased population will attract a big box. And Matt, to his credit, really reconsidered that wording and gave you the new wording tonight, which was the unique character of Taos, et cetera, et cetera. This document is big. There are all kinds of hidden trigger words in there that I think you as commissioners and the council need to carefully consider, bearing in mind that 60% of the population voted by paper ballot against a big box. So when we read statements like will, should, it's an imperative that, my ears perk up. And those of us in the construction trades or developers, our ears ought to be perking up. So I'm very grateful that Matt has reconsidered some of those wording changes, but it's taken some effort. The outreach that Mr. Foster has done is commendable, but it's by no means comprehensive. Another reason to slow down just a little bit here, to carefully consider, to go over what's been proposed tonight. The Taoseños against the Walmart Superstore are not just negatively minded naysayers. What are the words that are frequently thrown at us? We have some positive solutions. We have some economic development plans, some ideas that we've proposed to this body and the council this year. Seemingly, it's heard, but very little action has been taken. The foundation of the original Superbox issue was created by Vision 2020. The first layer above that foundation was the town's economic development plan. The economic development plan, as this body knows, and as I've talked to the town council about, though it's done by a reputable institution, our University of New Mexico, and a very reputable business source, Bureau of Economic Research, this plan is fraught with fault. And I pointed out just in the first paragraph a simple addition error made in that economic development plan. 66% leakage. This is a leakage study, how much business is leaving Taos. 66% is leaving Taos. 44% is staying. So those of you out there in TV land and here in the audience, do the addition. 66% and 44% is, well, it's 100%, right? Okay, so that's how it starts. I've tried to find the author of this. He's not out there. I'm so disappointed with the BBER's report. Taos Seños against the Super Walmart want to be involved. We have some very qualified people who can assist in an economic development plan. We come to the table with very positive ideas, all of which I've talked about here in the last year. We would like to see the implementation of a citizens advisory to this board and perhaps to the council if our goal is to maintain the unique character of Taos, if our goal is to foster and create small business, I think it might be helpful to get a small group of citizen volunteers together to help Matt with the economic development program. What I read in BBER was not what I would call an economic development program. So something for your consideration. The citizens are here. They're willing to work.
Mr. Hahn,
Yes.
may I ask you how much longer you intend to present?
I'm just let me review my notes. I think I'm almost done, and thank you. And Mr. Chairman, I don't know your name.
Doug Patterson.
Mr. Patterson. Mr. Patterson. Okay. Nice to meet you, sir. Just reviewing my notes, and I appreciate your patience. I'm not gonna jump into the population argument. That's an argument, the demographics, it can go both ways. Let's be careful. Let's not just assume that we're going to grow. We've had tremendous fires. Growth rates are flat. We have a nasty drought going on. It's a flip of the coin, in my opinion. And I think that's about it. So this is a huge, huge, huge decision. And some of the key players that are here tonight were not here 10 years ago when we went through this battle. Some were. And they were used to packed audiences going out into the street. And it was a heck of a fight. So we appreciate the opportunity to speak to you tonight. I'm sure there's some others.
Mr. Hahn, thank you for your
Thank
input
you.
and your passion. I certainly hear your concerns. Matt, would you have anything? What's your response to kind of a citizens committee in terms of the draft of that ordinance?
I think that would be great. In fact, the number one recommendation in the plan in terms of the code changes, it outlines a basic process of extensive public participation and meeting with the property owners that might want to develop a big box. It's very clear that it says the ordinance will not change the square footage. It makes provisions and even an illustration of what a big box could be like. I think a citizens committee would be great. In fact, I'm anticipating one, especially for the well, at least stakeholder meetings, not necessarily a steering committee, but absolutely for the revision of the economic development plan. It's going to need that.
And I think it goes back and forth. I don't think people take it seriously until something's on the block to be voted on.
Yeah.
So I appreciate Mr. Foster's effort to bring the plan up and make it go somewhere. I think we've waited for a long time for that to happen. And I think when you bring it up in front of a public entity like the Town Council for approval is when people take it seriously and have something to say.
So yeah, well, I'll rely on public input for the completion of the economic development plan and also for this ordinance to address the big box.
Right. Yeah. So, I think I would encourage both things. I would encourage a citizens committee, and I would encourage the sequential approval process of this plan take place. And if we step into that process and it needs to take a break because there's input that hasn't been heard, then so be it. But keep it on a plan and a timeline to be approved, and get people's input. Mr. Sanchez, did you have something to say as well? Would you please come up for us?
If I may, very quickly, the recommendation for completing this ordinance change would be 2014, so it would still be a ways out.
Right, and this is just one piece, so we're going after the land use element, which is one piece of that process in the next couple months. Okay. Mr. Sanchez.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I asked Fritz back there, who's the chairman? He said, I don't know. I thought I recognized the voice, but my eyesight is getting so bad that I can't see who's up there practically. Thank you very much for allowing me to come up and speak to you and the Planning and Zoning Commission, representatives from the town council, from the town, and the citizens that are here this evening, and those of you out in the TV audience. I'll be very short on the big box, because you've heard a lot of pros and cons about it. I started studying the effects of a big box on a community, especially a community like Taos, in 2002. I have 10 years of research, letters, what has happened in other communities, books, and it's just absolutely devastating what a big box does to a community, especially a community like Taos. It should not even be in our code. We should even be referring to a big box. Matt, are you going to recommend that the 80 or 80 some odd thousand square feet that we have now would be allowed to, we would exceed that, or is that still fixed?
It says in the plan recommends the changing of the ordinance for big box, and it says very clearly at the end of page 99, I would ask everyone read page 98 and 99. Read page 98 and 99, please. Because it says at the very bottom, this ordinance that we're contemplating will not change the 80,000 square foot limit.
Okay.
Page 99, bottom.
So
page
that
98.
means that a super Walmart or one of these big Lowell stores can't come in under the present code and the code that will hopefully be approved. That's gratifying to hear, because as I go around this community and I talk to various businesses, they're not for this big box ordinance at all. By that I'm referring to the like the super Walmart. So when I refer to big box, understand what I'm talking about. And if we were here tonight stating that this was going to change and allow these other big boxes to come in, this place would be packed. But anyway, as far as I'm concerned, if we leave it the way it is, I guess that's very acceptable. I would ask you, what happened to the Horacio Trujillo study that the town paid for a few years back when I was on the council? We paid Horacio Trujillo, who's a Rhodes Scholar and opened up his planning department in L.A., some $18,000 to come in and study our community, and they came up with a pretty good plan. It's been filed in File 13. When I was on the council, certain projects would come to us, and I would refer to the fact that, look, Horacio study says that this is the way it should be. This is what we pay these professionals to do, to come in and tell us, where do you want the parking, and so forth, and so on, and so on. Well, these plans are no good unless we can get a council who's going to study, understand what's in these plans, and understand what the effect of just saying, no, we're going to allow this to happen. If this continues, what we're doing here makes no sense. I hope that we can get a council who will study the effects of just arbitrarily saying, let my friend have a variance on this. We can't allow that to happen. And it's up to the community to see that it doesn't happen. You talk about infrastructure, the need to have more money. And we have made a study. If I'm not mistaken, Mr. Morrison, aren't there about 300 wells within the town of Taos?
Approximately.
All right.
Less than that.
Now, what does this mean? This means that these people who are using these wells are mining our aquifer. The tragedy is that the code also says that if these utilities are running along your property, that you must hook up to them. We don't enforce this. We're losing out on a tremendous amount of money to the extent that we had to raise the water rates about 2 years ago. You have people who are mining the water in certain areas where we don't have the utilities. They can run water all day long and not pay for this water, just mine it. They should have a meter on there and pay for the water that we who live in the town of Taos are paying for. If you were to collect the fees for the water, which then affects your sewer, we wouldn't have these problems. We talk about expanding the police department, expanding our emergency department, new buildings. We have space that we could use right now that we do not use. As planners, you should be making these recommendations along with the planning department. Why are we going to have to move our E911? If we don't have enough room here, we have enough room in the Don Fernando Hall here. Why are we illegally letting that space go? If we're going to have plans, let's see that they're enforced. Let's see that the people that are going to enforce them, in this particular case, besides the planning department, the council who's going to approve these things. And when these variances come to them, they've got to understand what they're doing. So I say that these plans, I think that what you presented tonight was absolutely excellent. But we have to carry through and see that everything that has been approved is followed through. And right now, there's a lot we could do to start improving the income that the town so badly needs. I know of more businesses that are closing down. You're very optimistic when you say this town is going to expand and we need industrial parks, etc. I would like to know where you get all this information, but thank you for listening to me. I could go on all night, but then we have other things to do. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Mr. Sanchez. Good night. Would anybody else like to speak? Yeah, let's go ahead. Go ahead. I think in the context of the plan that we're seeking, I would say let's try to kind of limit our comments towards comments on what Mr. Foster has presented tonight, and I guess things that would be productive towards the implementation of that.
Thank you. I'm Bob White from the El Tros Neighborhood Association. Our neighborhood is just outside the town limits, but bordering the southern border between Ranchos and Talpa and that area. We have quite a large bit of open space, mainly irrigated agricultural land. So my question is, because we're trying to formulate ideas about maintaining some of the agricultural production in our areas, what sorts of incentives or enticements do you see, or anybody else, has anybody else thought of to continue agricultural production? We face lots of challenges when you try to grow anything. Our water supply is limited, infrastructure to grow things, a very short growing season. Has anybody looked at any incentives to make farming a more attractive endeavor?
Thank you for that. Matt, I'm not sure if we have any response to that.
Sure. Briefly, in the section of the plan under the goal of dealing with agricultural land and being in productive use, I'm recommending a series of policies, but also the specific code amendments, a Right to Farm Act, agricultural zoning, really expanding the types of agriculture that are allowed by right in agricultural or, in our case, rural zones, clustered zoning, encouraging that, like by right or limited public hearings, that kind of thing. If the intention is to concentrate development in one area of the property and leave the rest open or available for agriculture, that can be done easier. Agricultural tourism zoning, accessory uses, B&Bs, let's see, hours of operation, allowing cooking, kitchen, food services, retail sales, campgrounds, rodeo, bed and breakfast,
Matt,
farmers markets,
Matt, is that
those
draft
kinds of
version
things that would be
available?
allowed under the code.
I'm sorry to interrupt.
That's all right.
Is that draft version available online?
Yes.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
So a draft version of this ordinance is available online, and in what section are you referring to there?
This is under goal number 2, starts on page 79.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. If you go to the town's website, there's planning. It drops down Vision 2020. Click there, and it says the May draft of revision 2020.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else? Let's go back here in the far right corner. My right, your left. Thank you for coming tonight. Would you state your name?
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman and Commissioners. My name is Brian Shields. I'm the Executive Director of Amigos Bravos.
Thank you.
We're a statewide river conservation organization. I just wanted to really thank Matt for having come to the Amigos Bravos office to make his presentation. And so we've had a chance to look at it and think about it a little bit. I would say that water is the defining factor for New Mexico. The future of New Mexico is totally dependent on water. I'd like to see a little bit a way to really focus more attention on the water issues. I would really recommend that we start thinking about developing an ordinance that would require a water impacts assessment for any major new development, especially, but maybe look at this plan from that perspective of doing a water impacts assessment. And what I mean by that is that a water plan at the moment, the county water plan, calls for 40-year planning for 40 years. We really need to be looking at a lot longer period of time than that. Any new development that comes in should be looking at how they're going to get that water, where it's going to come from, and how much they're going to use, how much they're going to reuse, how much they're going to put back into the system. And in addition to the water quantity issues, it really needs to be looked at from the water quality perspective. What quality is the water that they need, and what quality is the water that they're going to discharge? That's going to really add to the costs of treatment at the municipal sewage treatment facility if it's not good quality, and that should be built into the plan for dealing with those impacts. A water impacts assessment would be a way of looking at both the water quantity and water quality aspects. The other area that I would really like to see a little more focus on is the fact that there are 3 rivers that go through the town of Taos: the Rio Pueblo, the Rio Lucero, the Rio Fernando. Each one of those has its own water quality problems upstream and as it goes through the town. Those problems are really made a lot greater by the amount of hard surface when you have stormwater runoff. And that, everything that gets put on the ground, whether it's just, transmission fuel just kind of leaking in the parking lot or whatever, is going to end up in the river, in one of those 3 rivers at some point. So how do you create systems within the developments that will treat the water that lands on that development. And there's a lot of green infrastructure, a lot of low-impact development, solutions to those problems. But I would encourage really a big emphasis on that in terms of having each development, each unit be able to really process their own way to clean up their own water that lands on that development. And, so those are my main concerns at the moment. I will definitely look at this plan a little bit closer and give Matt some more feedback on it as ideas come up. But those are two issues that I would really like to bring up and have a discussion about later. The water impacts assessment one, and the low impact infrastructure, and the basically creating buffers for our rivers and any major development so that the runoff is kept within that. So thank you very much.
Thank you. I saw one or two more hands up. Is there anybody else that'd like to contribute? Please go ahead and come up. Thank you for coming.
Yeah, thank you. My name's Bob Bishop, and I have Tierra Wood Stove Store here in Taos, one of the survivors of Walmart. And I've been here for 41 years. And I just wanted to speak to the one point that was made about future growth will deliver us a big box store, that there was a causal relationship, intended or not, that I heard that said that growth is going to lead to a big box store. In my experience, in my store, I have two customer bases. I have people who buy window coverings from me, and I have people who buy wood stoves, primarily. The wood stove customers are largely local people, Anglo, Spanish, that have been here their whole lives, most of them. The window customers are totally different. They're a much higher income group. They have moved here in the last 5, 10, 15 years from Milwaukee, Los Angeles, Denver, Albuquerque, all over the place. These people are the prime, they're the sources of growth in Taos. We've lost population in Taos. And the reason we have a 50-year median age group in Taos, it's always been a very high age group since I moved here in '71. And the reason for that is there's no jobs here. When our youngsters graduate from high school, they leave Taos. Most of them leave Taos. That takes away a very young component from our community. And then we have people who go to LA, Phoenix, all over the country, and they work in a Grumman aircraft plant in LA or wherever, and they spend their whole working career there. And when they come back and retire, they come home to Taos. They come to Cuesta, they come to Penasco, they come wherever their home was originally, and they retire here. So we have older people here, high age group there. And what I found is, among all those people, when I go out to their houses, and that's the only way I get into homes in Taos, I go to work and I go home. So I don't get to see anybody unless I go out and measure window coverings. And when I go out into these people's houses, I talk to them. And I found out that these people are very, very progressive. 99% of the people who are moving here, who are causing our population to grow, are not necessarily coming here because they want a big box store. They're coming here to get away from wherever they moved from, to get away from that. They're not here to buy stuff. They're here to get to a unique place in the world that doesn't exist too many other places anymore. And what I'm just trying to point out is growth in population does not, in our town, does not necessarily have a causal link in a positive direction with a big box store. My experience has been just the opposite. Most of the people I talk to, and I've talked to a lot of them, in those homes over the last, since 1985 when I started selling window coverings, these people are not into that. They're not up for that much. And I stood here the second time that we were approached with a super Walmart. And I looked at the town councilors right here and I said, you guys have a really tough decision to make. You're in a tough spot right now. And I said, if I was in your spot, if I was sitting where you are right now, what I would do is I would have a referendum. When Fritz mentioned that referendum, I'm the one who suggested it. I stood right here and I said, if you guys want to find out how people feel, let's have one. Well, Bobby Duran was the mayor. He wanted a big box store. He was interviewed on the radio a number of times saying, I'd like to have a big box store because I think this, this, and this. He had his opinion. But what Bobby said was, I'll do whatever the people say. I'm the mayor. I could be the tiebreaker, and I'll do whatever they say. Well, they did have a referendum. And it wasn't 60-40, it was 66%. It was 2-1. 66% of the people did not want a big box store in Taos. Okay? Mayor Duran, when he came to vote, he voted against it. And every time I saw him in public after that, and I saw him at many meetings, I saw him at many, political get-togethers, all kinds of places, and every time I saw Mayor Duran, I said, thank you. Thank you for voting and doing what you said you're going to do, because a lot of people wouldn't have done that. They would have gone ahead and voted what they wanted instead of what the people wanted. But he actually respected that, and he went ahead and did it. So there's just a couple of my insights that I'd like to share that I've seen over here over a lot of years, and I think that's a good approach to follow in the future. I think if we're going to, move on something like that and have anecdotal evidence like I'm sharing right now and other people have shared, well, let's get a referendum. Let's see what the people do want, and let's go with that. Let's let the we had an election yesterday, and the people spoke. They got out and they turned out and they voted. And I think that we should do the same thing here. Why not? I mean, what do we got to lose? And let's have the people who are in this council go along and do the same thing that Mayor Duran did, even though he didn't like it. He did it, and I respected him for that.
Thank you for that.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Mr. Bishop?
Yeah.
Mr. Bishop?
Hold on one sec.
I have a question for you.
Yeah.
You said you were behind the referendum. What were the contents of that referendum specifically?
The contents of the referendum was, would you like to have a big box store in Taos, a super Walmart, or not?
And
that was it. That was it, straight up.
The reason I asked the question, and I don't know the answer to this, but I'm wondering if these types of referendums have expiration dates on them or not. So
I'm not saying that you have to abide by that last referendum. I'm just saying if you have questions about it now, I mean, Matt's made some, he has a guy in a department in town who says, geez, when do we get our new super Walmart? Well, I'm just saying maybe it could go broader than that.
Mr. Bishop, what I'm saying specifically is if there was a referendum that was passed, then that referendum potentially is still good. So there is no possibility of having a big box.
Well, that's one way of interpreting it. But what we're saying here in this meeting today is, how many years did they work on that vision? I've been here a long time. They worked many, many years to get the 2020 vision plan, and as soon as there was an opportunity for a big box store to come into town, somebody said, hey, why don't we throw this away and let's go for a big box? Well, why'd you spend all those years developing the vision plan if the first time you got an opportunity to whore yourself, you do that? I mean, to me, it's not right. It's just not the way you do it. And I trust the people of Taos. I stood up here last time. I trust the people of Taos. When I moved here, the Indian Camp Tam was a big issue. Gene Weisfeld was the attorney for the people representing the town and everything against all the developers. He was Herbie Goldfarb in the Milagro Beanfield War, John Nichols' book. The people won. I trust the people. The next thing that came along, we had the development out by the back mesa there where they're going to have a golf course. You talk about water, Brian. You talk about water at the golf course area out there. They were going to have a huge mall built all around there, do all this stuff. What was that one called?
Las Sierras.
Okay. I trusted the people. I said, let's ask the people what they want. Everybody in town, before they had a Valle Vidal sticker, they had one of those stickers on their cars, right? I trust the people. I trust the people of Taos. And every time we've had an issue like this come up, I said, I trust the people here. The people in Taos are very smart. They know who's on their side. They know who's going to protect their air, their water, their land. They know who's going to do it. And, if you have a question about it, put it up to a vote to the people. I've always trusted the people of Taos. I know how smart they are. And they've got a good heart. They've got a good head. And, if there's a question about growth and whether that means we're automatically going to have a super Walmart, I don't buy it. Right. I don't buy it because I've seen it before.
Thank you for that.
Yeah.
Mr. Chairman, if I could, I'm going to read the policy. If the town council were to adopt this the way it is, this is what their official policy is towards big box.
Please do.
Large-scale commercial development should be integrated into existing neighborhoods through careful consideration of surrounding land uses, transportation networks, natural corridors, and urban design traditions. The town council affirms that encouraging large-scale commercial development is a contradiction to the town's traditional development patterns and commitment to supporting local businesses. 87, page 87. Furthermore, the town council rescinds the policy within the economic development element, which recommends amending the LUDC to revisit limitations on big box development with possible creation of a big box zone. So I don't understand why we're having this conversation, frankly, of why do you want a big box?
I think
It's explicit as I could possibly get. It's on page
and I think, hold on.
It's not about the
Sir,
location
please.
of the big box. It's about what the big
Sir.
box does to your community financially and everything else.
That's enough.
It's not just about the buildings.
Yeah, that's enough. Thank you. If I could, I'd like to wrap it up in a bigger perspective. I think what we're going after is the development of a land use plan. And a land use plan is an overall plan for how land develops and how land's zoned in the town of Taos. I think the good part of what comes out of a public meeting like this is I think we really discover that there's probably a couple of hotbed issues out there, and they're singular to a couple of issues and concerns. One of those is obviously whether there's a big box or not. And I think that's one aspect of the land use plan. And I think to have public input on that is very important. And we've certainly heard what people have to say. And when we get that public input, then that relates to what's included in the plan or what's not. There will be several times that this land use plan comes up in public to receive public input. The next time it'll come up will be the December 5th meeting for planning and zoning, and then that goes in front of town council. And so there's time to have that input, but I think let's not get sidetracked on one hotbed issue. I think to have that input and get revisions in the plan and have the plan develop and grow over time is the important piece. The more important piece is that we get a land use plan that gives us a method and a direction to grow and develop in. And I think that's the most important piece. So thank you for your input. I appreciate it, and I think everybody is better off for it. We've heard enough for tonight. I think we've heard everybody's input, and we're not gonna bump around on one hotbed issue because there's a bigger question at hand. Yeah. Is there anybody else that would like to speak for tonight? I don't think there are. Yeah, Matt, if you have any closing comments, please offer them.
No,
yeah.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
Okay, good. With that, any other matters from staff?
Mr. Chairman, we do have, I'll turn it over to my boss to make a presentation to you on the streamlining of the application process.
And just for one record, our town planner is Bill Morris.
Morris.
Yes, Morris. Yes.
M-O-R-R-I-S.
M-O-R-R-S. We had a lot of variations on your name tonight, so
Okay,
let's set that straight for the record.
And this is a lot less rarefied than the topic that we just
Okay.
spent the time on. Basically, what this is involving looking at the code, specifically with the land development application process, trying to look at if there are ways that we can facilitate different kinds of applications being treated differently. Right now, the code basically says that almost anything that you do requires a development review committee meeting and at least 2 public hearings. Everything. It doesn't matter if you're proposing a large development or requesting a hairdresser, requesting a change of use within because it's conditional use. And so what we've tried to do here is look at the process, trying to gradate the processes with the application so it's stepped. Also looking for redundant text, just trying to make the damn thing smaller. Excuse me, I'm sorry, I'm getting tired. So going through the process, if you got your packets, beginning on page 3, this is just language that really needs to be in a different section. Okay. But the real guts of this thing really starts on page 5, at the top of page 5.
And I think, Mr. Morris, I think
You want to wait?
Are you referring to a draft that you gave us a while ago?
Previously issued?
Yes, this was given in your packets the last for the October 3rd. If a commissioner needs, I have extra copies here if a commissioner needs
Does
one.
anybody have a copy of that with them?
Yeah, is that the
It was like a 51-page.
proposal for streamlining? Yeah.
Streamlining. Seems like you could do it in 5 if it was really streamlining, right?
Well, if it was, yeah, they'd have to use real small font. You couldn't read it. And the way you read these things, just for
I think we've got a
clarification.
couple copies to share. So.
You got enough there?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, I got one more.
How this works is basically text that's being proposed to be deleted is struck out.
Okay.
And text that's being proposed to be added is underlined. That's the standard nomenclature when you go through this stuff. So going to page 5, what I'm attempting to do here is basically list everything, on the different kinds of applications and the situations, and then trying to basically gradate what kind of review process they'd be going through. So right now, under the first type, basically the district type is residential, and so permitted uses would just need a DRC. That's it. That you guys would never see it. Conditional uses right now, all conditional uses have to go through a DRC, a Development Review Committee, and 2 hearings before you guys, the preliminary and the final. I'm proposing here that a conditional use with just a change of occupancy and minor exterior modifications just needs the DRC. That's the hairdresser that had to go through the situation. Minor situation just needs to go to the Development Review Committee. It really doesn't need to be put before you at all. The second conditional use in a residential district is if the conditional use is a residential use, and we have those, they're listed, then I propose maybe a DRC and 1 public hearing before you guys. Because a residential conditional use is kind of a beefed up residential use, and so they're very similar. Conditional uses, which would be commercial, have to go through 2 hearings, because now you're interjecting basically potentially a commercial use in a residential district. You probably should look at it. It's probably different. So that's the basic nature. And then I flipped them for the conditional uses, or commercial. Permitted use, of course, in a commercial district goes to DRC. Conditional use, again, change of occupancy or minor changes on the exterior, Development Review Committee. And then conditional uses, which are residential in a commercial district, need 2 hearings because they're, again, the 2 different kinds. If it's a commercial conditional use, it would just need 1 public hearing. So the idea is to kind of, the more dramatic the change, the more review. If it's not that, it really doesn't need to go to you guys. I'm not explaining this well. I think it's, yes?
I got a question. Your underlined part below the structure,
Mm-hmm.
it says that it'll be scheduled before the planning and zoning as outlined above.
Only if it's
I got that
disproved.
part, but as outlined above, where is it outlined above?
Meaning in the table.
Oh, I see. So for 2 hearings or
Yes.
whatever it may be.
Right. If it's denied, you can, basically it can go through.
But it's not. I don't think it should be an automatic trigger upon denial. It should be if it's denied and the people decide that they want.
Correct. If they want to continue with it, that's assumed.
Okay.
I mean, if they don't want to go any further, I can't force them to come to you guys. I mean, as an application.
I see.
If they're denied at DRC and they want to continue, they would come to you as outlined in the table.
I see. Okay.
Special uses, I have provided here. Special uses are really very heavy duty. They tend to be very heavy duty uses. Cemeteries, hospitals, schools, those kinds of things, and they really do need to come to you guys for a couple hearings. And we don't get that many of them, but when they do, they can be pretty intense. And then finally, the provisional permit. This is the step that allows a commercial project to exceed 30,000 feet of space, going to 80.
That's great. Yes.
And so I have it here as 2 hearings before you guys.
Should be probably 5 hearings.
But I'm proposing actually
Bulletproof glass.
targets. I'd like for your consideration maybe creating a big one and a small one. And in view of the basic process, if somebody is proposing right now, if somebody wants to build a 30,000 square foot commercial project, it just goes through DRC and you never see it. But if it were between 30 and let's say 55,000 square feet, maybe they need to come to you guys for 1 hearing. Maybe it's pretty simple.
Yeah.
And then ratcheting it up from 55 to the cap is the full blown. Is that?
2 hearings.
2 hearings. So that would be in the same theory as everything else here.
Can I ask you a question?
Yes, sir.
Under the commercial and residential, there are instances when you're asking for 2 hearings. Can there be any flexibility built into it where, if it's like, that's how all this started, the streamlining. If it's like cut and dry, no issues, no concerns from your department, from the town departments, no one from the audience, neighborhood opposes, could it be converted into preliminary and final hearing into one day?
I would say that there's nothing that precludes, even if it says it's a single hearing, there's nothing that says that somebody makes a motion and says, I need additional information.
Then it goes into 2.
And it rolls over to 2 hearings anyway. So I don't have any problem with that. If you feel that.
How about the other way? How about the other way where conditional uses which are commercial, right now it says 2 hearings. Can we build flexibility into it that, if everything is nice and squeaky clean, to have it all in one day?
Yeah, I think that's fine.
And call it 2 hearings, but in one day?
I don't have a problem with that. And I can put some additional language in there saying that a second hearing may be requested by the commission if they determine that there's additional information that needs to be.
But on that situation there, conditional use, which are commercial, you're going with residential, is that what you're going with?
Well, either one.
Yeah.
Either one.
But I mean, if it's a residential and it's going into commercial, then there's a lot of factors that go into that.
Well, if it is, then it's 2
Yeah,
hearings. But what I'm saying, if it's like squeaky clean, no issues,
Yeah.
no concerns.
Yeah, we've had a couple of those.
Yeah.
I can change that to a single hearing and with a
Unless the
second
commission
that may be
decides on it.
requested by the commission. That way you're still protected. I mean, the community's protected if it's easy. I mean, you could do it anyway. I mean, you could roll a project on 3 hearings if you needed to, if it was a large project that was very complex. Are we okay with this? Generally speaking? Okay. And I'll change the 2 hearings to 1 with an optional 2 for those situations. And the strikeouts that you see were all the ones that kept repeating that they needed to go to a DRC and 2 public hearings, and so I've eliminated all those. On the bottom of page 6, I want to provide the same using the same theory to variances. We've had, right now technically in the code, if your variance is 100% reduction in the front setback or 1-inch movement technically by the code, you have to go through 2 DRCs, or 1 DRC and then 2 public hearings. And I think that if a variance being requested is relatively minor, we could handle it at a certain level. And as the variance increases, it means that it's having a greater impact potentially on the location, the site development, structure. It's typically structures, right? Basically, it's setbacks or lot sizes, these sorts of things. And so the greater the amount of that variance that's being requested, probably should require a greater degree of scrutiny as it goes up the line. And so what I've done here is I'm proposing that if the variance request is anywhere from 0 to 5% of what's required, I do it at basically my level. Between 5 and 15%, it goes to DRC, because now it's getting to be a bigger issue. Between 16 and 30%, DRC, and 1 hearing before you guys. Because now we're talking about some significant reductions in what's supposed to be. And then finally, I said I'll just put these numbers out here. 31% or greater, or more, or 2 or more variance requests. Meaning now the last one needs your full-blown review process, because now you're really looking at doing all sorts of things that are contrary to the code and probably really should be looked at pretty seriously.
Makes sense.
A project that has more than 2 or more variances, you're stuffing a lot in a 5-pound bag. So that's the process there that we're really thinking about in terms of theory. Generally okay? And then just to let you guys know, this will come back to you on December 5th as well for a formal request to move it on to the council. The next provisos, basically the next stuff that you see is all being stricken because it really needs to be in a different place in the code, totally. It needs to be in Chapter 15. It's all about building permits, and Chapter 15 is about building standards. So that's where it's getting relocated. I'm not sure why it's here at all. Okay. One thing also I want to talk about real fast. We have 4 agricultural zoning districts on the books for an urban town, but we have 4 of them. Everywhere from a 20-acre minimum, 10-acre minimum, 6-acre minimum. And what I'm going to request or propose here is, aside from, you know, looking at the uses that are within, do we really need 4 of them? I mean, it's a town, so I'm recommending maybe the deletion of the 20-acre minimum, the RA.
Are there even 20 acre?
There's nothing that's 20 acres. I mean,
Yeah,
I don't think you
okay.
need 4 of them. This is a county kind of thing, but you're in an urban environment still, and so having one agricultural district allows for all these uses. It doesn't preclude anything. It just seems like it's overly agricultural.
Each one of us needs individual zoning. Said each one of us needs individual zoning.
That's right. I mean, it's like a custom zoning district.
That sounds fine.
And we don't have any. All we have is the RA stuff, which is the least. We don't really need that. So anyway, I'm proposing the next 25 pages up to page 27. It would take all that out. On page 2751, you've got some redundant text. Historic preservation, at the next meeting, we'll be hearing the same theory that we just did here for the certificate of appropriateness. So that, I didn't include that in here under your section, but that's their bailiwick, and so that commission will deal with that particular instrument. And then going along, the last thing I want to propose is on page 37. It seems like after every kind of application, they repeat a requirement for the actual plans that come in. They've got to be this scale, they've got to have a north arrow, they've got to have, you know, existing and proposed and all the same stuff. And so I just said, why are we doing that 6 times? Let's just have a pointer to one of them and say, if you're going to do a site plan, you provide your plans according to this section over here instead of listing it out. And that's what all this is. It's just the same stuff repeated ad nauseum. So you can save a few pages and a few trees by just eliminating that. And that's basically it. But the part that's the real core is that graduated review process. And I think that personally it'll help streamline. I've heard you guys say this numerous times since I've been here. Why are we having to do this twice? On a lot of these, they really are slam dunks, and so I think this will help the community out. It'll help you guys out because you won't have to listen to the hairdresser story 3 times. And so this is basically what we're looking at, and like I said, I'll bring this back on December 5th for a formal recommendation by you guys.
Does this need to be reviewed by council or not?
Yes, sir. It's actually going to be scheduled for December.
Okay.
So it'll go to you guys. If you have any comments, let me know. When you read it, there's actually more comments that will be in the next version that you get, because there's another slew of stuff that we want to get rid of. A lot of redundant text. I hate redundant text. And I'm not sure who wrote this, but they were getting paid by the word.
So what we'll get in the presentation in December is all this taken out and just one new revision.
It will look similar to this, but it'll actually contain more stuff that we're proposing, and you'll make a motion on all of that to send to council or not send to council or whatever, just like on Matt's.
I have one question.
Yes, sir.
It's well written. It's a lot tighter. I appreciate that. The question I have is from the protester's perspective, not necessarily the person presenting their idea. A lot of people, like for example, let's say you have one meeting before this commission according to that, but there's somebody that really disagrees with it. Now, do we need to put a procedure in place for somebody that's protesting because they may not have the time to get all their ducks in a row in that first hearing. So
That would be up to us then, to give them the opportunity.
And there's an
I think
appeal.
we should standardize it.
There is an appeal process that's not included in this text, but it is located. So if there's somebody that has an issue with an outcome, there is a procedure to appeal any decision made by you guys, whether it's after one hearing, two hearings, or after a DRC. It gets bumped up to the next level, basically, in the code. So,
Yeah, so it would go to the council. That's the way
Yes, sir.
it has been. But being a responsive body, our planning commission, if there are concerns by either department of the town or the public, we don't make a decision until we have all the facts.
and you do have,
reserve the right anytime to expand it.
yes, sir, you have that now.
We could choose to, approve
With conditions and disapprove,
Or
or postpone, table it.
Continue, right.
So
Yeah.
we could choose, if it was a divisive issue and not all the facts were on the table, we could choose to continue an application versus make,
Yeah,
make
this,
an opinion.
this was to achieve, to have the tool to hold a one meeting on those piddly applications that we've had so many here, that we drag the people through 2 meetings, and a month waiting.
I agree. No, I agree.
Silly. Great.
Thank
This is moving in great,
Mr. Morris.
in the right direction. Thank you very much. Sure.
Anybody else?
Adjourn, motion.
No, I have to ask her.
Oh.
You guys.
Move to adjourn?
So moved, Mr. Chairman.
Second.
All in favor?
Third.
Aye.
It looked like a short meeting.
No way.